Good morning, depending on where you are. I guess it is morning or early afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Alyssa Plumer, and I'm with FEMA Region 10's Individual and Community Preparedness Program. And my team in here are really excited to present this information to you. We know that preparedness has been at the forefront of many of our minds for the past year and a half, given the circumstances with the pandemic. And we just hope that this information is helpful and motivating to continue on your preparedness journey wherever you are, whether you're just starting or whether you have all your supplies and plans in place and just need updating. So thanks for being here. And we are going to have another webinar on Thursday. Today's is focused on preparedness at home, and Thursdays will be focused on social support networks. Just some housekeeping reminders. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. If you do have questions or comments, definitely drop them in the chat throughout today's webinar. This webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes, and the first half will be a presentation by my colleague Tanya and myself, and then the second half will be a panel. So definitely stick around because it'll be chock full of information, and I'm really excited to hear from our panelists later today. We will be sharing resources throughout this event, and we'll also be sharing the PDF of the slides and a resource list towards the end, so stick around for that. I see a question in the chat, but we'll get to that later. But thank you for using the chat already. And if you aren't able to access the chat, you should be able to raise your hand through the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. There's a hand raise option, and we can call on you and you could unmute when there's time for questions at the end. So here are the different topics we'll be covering. We hope that this is interesting and beneficial to you. Some of this might be review, but that's never a bad thing. I know that it's so easy to put preparedness off because we are busy and we have other things going on, but unfortunately, Mother Nature has her own plan, and it's better to be proactive and have some plans in place just for whenever an event does happen. So starting off, being informed, before we can get prepared, we need to know what we're preparing for, right? So this can be anything from more day-to-day weather-related emergencies like rain, wind, and how that could impact you and your community, to larger scale catastrophic events like a no-notice event like an earthquake. I know in Region 10, which is made up of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska, earthquakes are very much a hazard. I know that there was an earthquake in Alaska recently, and there's also the Cascadia subduction zone fault line that goes from Northern California to British Columbia that could impact the whole West Coast basically. So that's one event that we're really planning for at FEMA Region 10. And I would be remiss to not mention and shout out a thank you to our state partners in all of those 4 states for helping us prepare for this webinar and for just their partnership all the time and for connecting us with the awesome panelists for today. So once you know your risk, make sure you also know your evacuation zone and the plans. Where do you need to go if the local officials advise you to evacuate? Of course, that depends on the hazard, whether it could be a tsunami warning or a wildfire threat. So know your evacuation zone. Know how you will get those alerts and that information from your local authorities in case of an emergency. I'm curious, let's practice using the reactions. Give me a thumbs up if you've already signed up with your local alerts, whether that's in your city, your county, your borough, your state. I see a few. Okay, the numbers are growing. First off, I am impressed with the turnout. We have over 80 people on, which is awesome. And I see about 23 or so thumbs up. So kudos to you. If you aren't signed up for your local alerts, definitely look into that. With a quick Google search, you should be able to find out how to do that. Pretty exciting news in the last few months, the Shake Alert, or the earthquake early warning, has been released in Washington and Oregon. And that is a big deal. It can give up to a few seconds of notice before an earthquake. happens. That might not seem like a big deal a few seconds, but it really is, because not only does that give you time to get in a safer spot for when the ground does stop shaking, you can get away from your windows, glass, anything that might harm you. It also gives hospitals and other facilities a heads up to, get their generators ready, have their backup systems in place, elevator doors won't shut on people, and so forth. And most importantly, know where to get accurate information specific to where you live. So that's kind of the summary of being informed. We do have a lot of resources out there from FEMA, as well as your state emergency management offices and your local offices. So check those out. Download the FEMA app if you have a chance. I know one of our panelists, Brenda, she actually messaged me that the FEMA app gave her a notice last week after an earthquake in Alaska. So that was neat to hear a personal account of the FEMA app being helpful. And it's also just a handy toolkit to help you take preparedness steps and kind of remind you of what all you can do to be proactive. So in terms of making a plan to stay or go, whether you need to evacuate or not, most importantly, listen to your local authorities. I think I've said that a lot, but that's important. There are different types of, well, not evacuation, but there's either the shelter in place option if you aren't to evacuate, but you're supposed to stay in your house and not go out for a set amount of time. That might be during a chemical emergency, or even this past year, I know a lot of states and local jurisdictions encouraged people to stay at home as much as possible in the early days of the pandemic. And you know what? A lot of people were frantically shopping, getting their week's worth of water, food, and toilet paper. As we know, it was very hard to find toilet paper. But for those of us who were already prepared to some degree, it was a lot less stressful. So it definitely emphasized preparedness, and it just goes to show you never know when it might be helpful. Okay, and then in terms of evacuation, have your go bag ready, all of your essential items that you need if you have to leave your house at a moment's notice without warning. You don't want to have to start looking for your medications and any other important documents or whatever you may need. And this is just an overview of making a plan. I'm not going to go through all of this because we will be sharing the slides at the end. But some things to note: if you do rely on power for medical equipment, definitely contact your utility companies and see if they can kind of put you on a list to be aware of and to get the power up and available to you as soon as possible once it's available. Also, people with access and functional needs, regardless of age, people might have mobility challenges, may need support in evacuating, needing transportation services. It's important to share that information with your local emergency managers. Some have some sort of system to keep track of that, so it's worth looking into for yourself or for your loved ones. Also, know your neighbors. I mean, those are the folks in your immediate community. And I know in this last year, I got to know my neighbors a lot more because we weren't really leaving our neighborhood as much. And so we knew to check on each other and to see how we could help each other out. So if you have a specific need that you could use a little extra support with, definitely give your neighbors a heads up, as well as your social support network, your loved ones, your friends, your family, and so forth. And we will be focusing more on that on Thursday's webinar. And then in terms of backup chargers and batteries, many of us are very reliant on technology, especially this past year. So if the power were to go out for an unknown amount of time, it might be devastating to not know, where all of our information is or how to access it if it's stored on our devices. So make sure to have backup batteries in place for your cell phones. And there's a lot more information on this slide, so take a look at it later when we send it out. A big part of making an emergency plan is the communications. So I know my number one concern after knowing that I'm okay from a disaster is, how are my loved ones? How am I going to get in touch with my family? What if I'm not with them when a big earthquake happens? I think many people can share that concern. So have a plan with your loved ones of how you're going to get a hold of each other. This should include an out-of-state contact because it's often easier to go long distance through text or phone call than locally after a large event where all the local phone lines are tied up. Also, taking into account access and functional needs. Once again, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to keep emphasizing this because it's important to think of what you should be considering in terms of mobility and transportation and medication and all those programs and supports many of us rely on for a day-to-day basis. Know your meeting places. If you're not with your loved ones, where are you going to meet up with them if you're able to get to that place? Like my sister and her family live in West Seattle. I live in North Seattle. It's quite far within the city limits, so I'd probably try to meet halfway if possible. So think about your options, talk with your loved ones, and also know what the different plans are in place for where you spend a lot of your time, including at community centers. If you're taking care of grandkids, what's their school or daycare center, emergency center plan, and so forth. And there's all this information on ready.gov of pointers of how to start or how to update your emergency plan. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tanya, to talk about aging in place. So Tanya, it's all you.
Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to make sure to really speak about aging in place. It involves the conscious decision of an aging individual to stay in the residence of their choice for as long as they can with the comforts that are important to them. I think the thing that you really need to focus on here is making the conscious decision. As you do begin to age, you may need supplementary services to support the living conditions and maintain your quality of life. So I just want you to take into consideration, how are you going to make your home accessible before and during a disaster? So if you do have maybe mobility challenges or visual challenges, taking into consideration, how are you going to quickly evacuate? How are you going to quickly gather your belongings? If you end up having to shelter in place, are there things that you do need to have in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle? Long-term care considerations. So if you have someone coming to check in on you, help with things around the home, what will it look like if they are not able to reach you for whatever reason? Ensuring that your home is affordable. So just making sure that you have, home insurance, making sure that you can afford to continue to live in the home that you're at, and then making sure that you are not isolated. So it's known that as you begin to age, it becomes a little bit more isolating just because of, family moves away. Some family members have moved across the country, things like that. And we want to make sure that we aren't isolated as we age in place. So the next one will be a care plan. So a care plan is a document that specifies your assessed unique individual needs and outlines what type of support you should get, how the support will be given, as well as who should provide it. So as you see on the right side, it's called a care plan. And the one that you see there is from the CDC themselves. You can download it off of their site, and you can either print it out or you can fill it out online and then print it, whatever you're more comfortable with. But basically, you will sit and assess what your needs are. So what type of support should you be receiving, whether it be medical, any mental health concerns, any of your desired outcomes, maybe who should provide the care. So what hospital, what doctors you work with, when care and support should be provided, records of your care provided, your wishes and personal preferences, and a ton more. There's a bunch of different care plans online, and some of them are more expansive. Some of them are just like very specific to your medical needs. But as you can see in the care plan right there, it says like your first name, last name, you know, the general information, personal information. And then it says, what do you want other people to know about you? So it really personalizes it to you, and it allows people, so if you are evacuated, it allows people to know who you are as a person, but also the needs that you have. Some of the considerations we do want to make are for rural communities. When there is a disaster, we want to think about the resource limitations, such as equipment and supplies, training and infrastructure. As we know, in rural communities, it can often be an expansive area that doesn't have super high population density. And so in those cases, we really want to get to know the neighbors that we have. We want to know what their limitations are, who's going to need that support in times of disaster. Access to healthcare for higher levels of care. Oftentimes, you know, like level 1 trauma centers aren't super available in, you know, in rural communities. And so we want to think about what would happen if something terrible did happen within my community. Where would we go? What would be the arrival time of an ambulance? Things like that. Any communication issues. So if there is a power outage, if there's, you know, if your phone lines go dead, how would you communicate to people? This is a really, really great example of how you need to plan out your communication plan. If there is going to be a tornado or whatever the case may be, and you know that, you know, you live by yourself, or a lot of people don't come by and check on you very often, you want to take that into consideration and make sure that you have a plan for, okay, we haven't heard from this person in 2 days. We should probably check in on them. And if we can't reach them, something may be wrong. We want to just put those plans into action to make sure that we remain safe, and being from a rural community doesn't keep you from remaining safe. Making a financial plan. So something that's really important, I think that's kind of overlooked, is making sure that you have cash on hand when a disaster happens. Oftentimes, if the power goes down, you may not be able to pull money from that ATM. You may not be able to reach somewhere that can pull money from your ATM. So if you pull money from like a gas station, would you be able to pay the gas people for that gas if you can't access your accounts? Gather any financial and critical personal, household, and medical information into one spot. Like we said earlier, during an emergency kit, you want to make sure that you have everything in one spot that is easily accessible, that you can grab on the way out, or have it maybe online so that you can access it there as well. Start an emergency savings account. That should include like enough money on hand, but also in your account to keep you safe for at least 2 weeks. Buy all hazards and flood insurance. Oftentimes people don't know that flood insurance is not part of normal home insurance, and that can really impact your ability to get aid when a disaster occurs. Receive your benefits electronically, and just make sure that you have access to everything if your home were to be destroyed or you had to evacuate. Important documents. This is like we said earlier, make sure that you have somewhere to store those important documents. It can really, really save you a lot of time to make sure that you have like your IDs, your social security cards, and like a fireproof box. That way, if a fire does happen, if you have to evacuate, you can come back and you know that that box is going to be there full of your property titles, all of that stuff. It's really hard to replace, and it's probably the last thing you want to think about when you're trying to talk with your insurance company. Building a kit. So our recommendation is right now to be 2 weeks ready. These are just some of the items that you should have in a kit. Some examples are having, prescription medication, if possible, to get maybe, have a couple extra on hand. If that's not possible, making sure you get them right on time. That way you don't have, there's no gap where a disaster could happen, you don't have your medication, and then there's no way for you to possibly get it. Pet supplies, phone chargers. This is an extensive list. You can always find more online if you're worried about that. But yes, definitely go to the website that Sam just put into the chat. It's buildakit@ready.gov. And yeah, please look at that. And then additional medical considerations. Like I just said, make sure that you include medications and medical supplies. If you take medicine or use a medical treatment on a daily basis, make sure that you have on hand what you would need in case something were to happen. So if you have, like, let's just say a dialysis machine, what would happen if your power went out? Taking that into consideration, as if there is a large scale disaster, hospitals will more than likely be overwhelmed, and just making sure you know that in the back of your head, how can you prepare for that? If you use eyeglasses, hearing aids, things like that, that will definitely be helpful to have them on hand. And having copies of your medical insurance, Medicare and Medicaid cards should be readily available. Building a kit for pets. It's pretty similar to the same needs that you have. Just make sure you have food, water, bowls, whatever you may need. I keep like a bowl and some stuff in the back of my car in case I do need to evacuate. But just make sure you're able to provide for your pets the way that you provide for yourself. And then I think.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Okay, I'll take it from here. So just curious, thumbs up, use your thumbs up under reactions if you have some sort of a go bag or supplies kit, and as well as an emergency plan, both or either. I'm just curious. Okay, let me see how things are looking. Ooh, we have reached 100 participants, first of all, which is awesome. Thank you for getting the word out to all of your contacts. There's lots of thumbs. I don't know what the max amount of thumbs was, but around 20, I think. So great for those who already have their emergency plans and their supplies. Awesome job. Remember to keep updating and refreshing them. When I change the clock for daylight savings, change it forward or back every 6 months, that's when I update my kits and refresh my plans. So even if you have it done, make sure to keep it up to date. And for those who don't have a plan or a kit, that's okay. This is a good chance to get started on that. Okay, of course, emotional health is very important, as we especially have seen in the last year and a half. I mean, we've known this for as long as humans have been around. We've had our emotions, but it's been a rough year for so many people, and it's important to take care of yourself, whether that includes counseling or therapy or other support services, community groups, taking breaks sometimes from watching, reading, or listening to the news. I know it can be really upsetting and overwhelming at times. And of course, your physical health impacts your mental health. So eating healthy, exercising regularly, sleeping, not oversleeping, maybe meditating or whatever it is that kind of brings you back to feeling calm. Minimizing alcohol and drug use. So this list could go on and on. Just a reminder that emotional health is really important and does tie into all of this, because we need to take care of ourselves in order to be able to be okay in a stressful situation such as a disaster, and to hopefully be able to connect with others and help others as we're able to. There are ways to get more involved in your community. Please thumbs up if you are involved in your community in some way, whether that's a volunteer organization or a CERT, a community emergency response team group. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be on this list. I see some thumbs, 16 thumbs. I bet there's more. Oh, okay, numbers are going up. About 20. I bet more of you are involved than that, but that's awesome. And it's also good for your emotional health as well, and to stay connected. There are so many ways to get involved when it comes to emergency and disaster preparedness. We'll be hearing from a few of our CERT leads on the panel in a moment. And these are some other areas that directly connect to preparedness in different ways. And of course, it's always a good idea, and it's a confidence and skill builder to just get trained and go through different trainings, whether it's first aid, CPR, AED. I know there's even been a lot of online options for training, including You Are the Help Until Help Arrives, which is a free training through FEMA, and there's Stop the Bleed offered by some providers depending on where you live. So with that, Oh, and Sam put a link into the You Are the Help Until Help Arrives training. Thanks, Sam. We will share this slide after the panel, but we'd love you to fill out the Google form, which is highlighted there, so that we can get your email on file if you'd like to stay in touch and receive additional resources and information in the future. We did not require email for this webinar, so we don't have any of your emails on file. Sam just dropped the link in the chat, so please take a moment to fill that out. We'll also leave a moment after the panel as well. And with that, I would love to introduce our panel. So I'm super excited to have these 4 people here. They're wonderful and they do so much in their communities. Talk about community connection. Both Brenda McCain and Mark Hill are CERT trainers. Well, Brenda is the CERT lead in Willow, Alaska, and Mark Hill is a CERT trainer in Washington. We also have Raul Enriquez with the Southwest Idaho Area Agency on Aging, and we have Wendy Flick, a social worker and home health care provider in Oregon. So we're pleased to have each of our 4 Region 10 states represented on this webinar, and I am going to spotlight them in a minute and take off this slide so that we can see their faces. So give me 1 minute as I do this.
I'm good, bud. There we are.
There's Raul. And there's Brenda. And there's Mark. And we have Wendy. I think we are good. So it's so great. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we go ahead and start with a brief introduction of each of you, starting with Raul, because he's in the upper left of my corner, and we'll kind of go clockwise. If you can just give us a brief introduction about who you are and what you do in relation to this webinar. Thanks so much.
Sure. Can you hear me? My name is Raul.
Yes.
My name is Raul Enriquez. I'm the director of the Area Agency on Aging. We provide in-home services to seniors. We also house the Adult Protection and Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. We're specifically tasked to provide communication and support for individuals that are 60 and older during these disasters. Typically during disasters, seniors living in nursing homes and assisted livings are impacted significantly more than members of the general public. And so I think that's our responsibility in relation to disaster planning.
Great, thanks, Raul. How about you, Brenda?
Okay, hello, I'm Brenda McCain from the Willow, Alaska Community Emergency Response Team, CERT. I'm also a Red Cross Disaster Health Services nurse, and the past year I have been working supporting Alaska Public Health as a contact tracer for COVID-19. I live on a hay farm in a rural area about 75 miles north of Anchorage. We have one road that runs north and south through our community from Anchorage heading north. There's no side roads at all. And if our road gets blocked by wildfire or the bridges were to go out because of an earthquake, we essentially become an isolated community with no access to it. We consider ourselves to be independent, capable people, but we're also aware that that could be changed at any time because of a disaster. So we feel a need to be prepared and for emergencies and have to plan for contingencies. After seeing what happened in New Orleans, which has all kinds of access to it in Katrina, we really started focusing on our emergency preparedness. And so that's started my journey on really focusing on preparedness. So.
Thanks so much, Brenda. How about you, Wendy?
Okay, I am a medical social worker in Salem, Oregon, and I've been doing social work for about 20 years in and around the healthcare field. And in the last 5 years in the home health setting, which means I go to people's homes who are at the time or permanently homebound. So I get to see how a lot of people's daily lives are and what they have around them and what they don't have around them. And my tie to emergency management is through marriage, so I'm an in-law. So the Oregon Department of Human Services emergency manager is downstairs in his home office. So been hearing and working around that, got to help with some local facility, all the Medicare, when the new Medicare rules came out for emergency preparedness, got to help with some training for all of those businesses in our area to help address the needs of, the people, the patients, the people who need access to these healthcare. How do we keep these healthcare systems running? So that's me.
Thanks, Wendy. And how about you, Mark?
My name is Mark Hill. I'm a retired firefighter that used to help teach CERT classes. My wife and I moved to a 55+ community in Lacey, Washington, and were immediately recruited to help with their emergency preparedness program. Luckily, our community has really embraced being prepared. They've been doing the Map Your Neighborhood program, and will transition to the new program when Washington State and Oregon gets that up and running. And we've been helping with ongoing CERT training, and basically just trying to build up confidence in people and trying to get people excited and willing to participate in the trainings. And we, along the way, met a lot of really interesting people that have a lot of skills that we immediately tried to grab onto and bring them into the fold. And that's us.
Great, thanks, Mark. Can we just take a minute to thank our panelists before we even dive in, because they do such important work. So I'm going to give a celebratory reaction. Feel free to do whatever reaction you want, but thank you so much for what you all do. And it's wonderful to hear just the different representation from rural communities to home health care, to working with community volunteers, to working, supporting the different programs locally. Like I know Raul works with Meals on Wheels and different programs that provide support. So this is a wealth of knowledge, and I just feel really grateful that we could all be here for the next 20 minutes or so. I know it's not a lot of time, but I encourage, if people have questions for this group, definitely put them in the chat. I know we have a question from earlier, which I'll get to at the end, but if you have questions specific to this panel, put them in the chat, or if you can't chat, raise your hand and you could vocalize them. But in the meantime, I have a few questions I'm going to ask them. So the first one is, and I'm going to kind of do this popcorn style, so not everyone needs to answer every question for the sake of time, but I have a few people in mind for some of these questions. And if anyone else wants to expand on their answer, please feel free to. What is something that you've done to get better prepared for emergencies and disasters? This is pretty general, but I just want to bring it back to why we're here, which is basic preparedness. So Brenda, I'd love to turn that over to you.
Unmute.
Oh yeah, you are muted.
I failed. My husband is very capable and very, very prepared, but I started realizing, he could be away. He could be the first one to have the ceiling fall on in an earthquake, and so I really felt like I needed to be more prepared myself. We have to plan for all contingencies. So seven years ago, I took the FEMA 20-hour basic CERT course so that I could, that's what's required to be part of a CERT team. But people take it just for personal preparedness. And that actually was my goal at first, just to be more prepared. And it gave me the foundation that I needed to learn about preparing for disasters and emergencies. But the group of us that took it then decided to form a CERT team in our community. Excuse me, I have to plug in my computer. I'm sorry. Just 1 second here.
No worries. We understand. We've all been there.
Yeah.
You could take this moment to start filling out your Google form if you haven't
Okay,
already.
sorry about that. I plugged it in on one end and not on the other.
No, you're good.
So anyway, we formed this team, and then we immediately after forming it, we had a huge wildfire, which was great because we got to put our skills immediately to use. So we continue to train, and we develop skills and knowledge and community preparedness. And we're not professional responders, but we are trained volunteers, neighbors, helping neighbors, and we support the responders, the professional responders, and we work with our emergency services in our community, and they activate us in response to disasters. And since we formed our team, we've had 3 major wildfires, a 7.1 earthquake, a middle of the winter, totally unexpected below zero ice jam flooding where people had to evacuate their homes, a pandemic, which we had trained for, believe it or not, and a couple of weeks ago, another 6.1 earthquake. So our team currently, we're a small community of about 2,000 people. We have over 30 volunteers. The majority of us, only 3, I believe, are not eligible for AARP. We're all mostly all seniors. And 3 of our most active, one who I see is on here today, 3 of our most active team members are in their 80s. You don't have to have, we come from all different types of backgrounds. You don't have physical limitations don't prevent you from being involved in CERT, but if you take the training, you don't have to join a CERT team. You can take it just for your own personal preparedness. But, and if you do join a team, you choose your own level of involvement, at least with our team anyway. But for us, it's created a community within our community of trained volunteers. And we've all taken CPR and first aid, we've taken Stop the Bleed, we just continually train. So, and it's also, we have it, we'll speak about social networks. It's created a social network for us too. So we do look out for each other. So I would encourage other seniors to seek out this training, either for personal use or to think about joining a CERT. There's more than 2,700 CERTs in our country, and you can find one simply by typing in the search box, find a CERT. And when you type in just find a CERT, it connects you to a FEMA site that will tell you the 20, I believe it's 20 CERTs closest within a 100-mile radius. And then you can find out one closest to you and find out about taking training. Also, I think, so that's my biggest thing I wanted to speak about was preparing for that. But she mentioned about the FEMA app. That was a real surprise to me because I've had it on my phone for a while. And 11 o'clock at night, we had the 6.1 earthquake, and I was just getting out of the shower, and all of a sudden my phone started buzzing, and there it was on there, and it gave me the opportunity, if I wanted, to notify my contacts of my status. And so that FEMA app is really great. And I realized, because I'd forgotten I put it in there, that I had put the location of each one of where my children were located. So if they had a hazard, I would have been notified of that as well. So anyway, I would say, since you're listening today, you already have an interest in emergency preparedness. And so I would say seek out all opportunities to learn what you can about it, and then become an ambassador for emergency preparedness to your friends and your family and your neighbors. So.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I feel like you captured the essence of it right there. So not only was it a good pitch for CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team training, but it is just a good reminder that we can all get better prepared regardless of our conditions, even if we might have, some physical challenges or mobility challenges. Everyone has a role. And so I think that's a big takeaway. So thank you so much, Brenda. And I know Mark was nodding along because I'm sure he has very similar perspective with his CERT team as well. And I see someone asked, how can we set up a CERT team in our area? So Brenda mentioned, if you Google CERT, C-E-R-T, there's a search link within the main website where you can search for your closest CERT team. If you're not able to find that, Sam is awesome and just put in the link. Thank you, Sam. If you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us at our general email address, which Sam, I'm sure, can put in the chat, and it will also be in the slides at the end. And we can get you connected with your state CERT coordinator, because every state has a CERT coordinator that we are closely in touch with. And Sam just put our general email in the chat. So don't hesitate to reach out if you can't find your closest CERT team. Okay, next question. Thanks, Brenda. So aside from that personal example of getting better prepared as an individual, what are some promising practices at the individual or community level that can help people get better prepared? Do either of you have any? That's kind of similar to the question I asked Brenda. Does anyone else have something they want to expand on that? Maybe Mark, I'm looking at you just because you might have some other examples at that community level from your experience.
Yeah. Well, we were lucky in that our community was already using Map Your Neighborhood, which really emphasizes getting to know your neighbors, finding out what their strengths were, but also what their needs were, so that before something happened, we were able to get a good feel as to who could help who, and make people a little bit more comfortable with that. And that's helped even with snowstorms. Here in the Lacey area, we don't do very well with snow. It can lock things up pretty quickly. And then also the homeowners association, if you happen to have one, or if not, the larger groups that are in your community, if they've already explored this. We were lucky in that Thurston County Emergency Management and our local fire department, Lacey Fire District 3, had all been wanting to help communities get up and running. And so finding out what support is already out there.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Mark. And I see that Wendy has her hand up.
Yeah, just from the bits that I see within the healthcare system, so at your clinic, or if you are getting home health at this time, or if you're getting caregivers at home, there are things that have been started to get put into place within those to ask their patients, you guys, the consumers, about do you have an emergency plan? No, it's not great, and that's my next project, is to make it even better. But there is tools out there that your healthcare providers have that you can get it on record, that, or have an opportunity to talk to that person about their plan, because that's where you're going to talk about, I'm on oxygen. So it's really important that I have either extra oxygen tanks or I have power. And who do I need to tell about those things? So talk to the people that are coming to you, if you're a homebound person, or when you go to your doctor's office, say, hey, can we talk about my emergency plan? Talk to your home health providers and get that stuff on record. Because some of those providers then are going to be able to, in an emergency, give that information to the proper authorities, such as your county emergency manager, depending on what's going on, and say, hey, here are some people that are at risk, and your name will go to those folks. Find out where you can register yourself, like your power company, your gas company, as somebody who is particularly vulnerable for those resources.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Yeah, I'm glad that you emphasized that, because it is really important that people advocate for themselves and for their
Definitely.
needs, and for their loved ones and their needs, regardless of age and abilities. We need to stand up for ourselves and our loved ones and get it on people's radar that we need, we might need a little extra support and assistance, especially during an emergency. Thanks for that. And that reminded me, I meant to ask earlier, if people are here representing like a care provider or an organization that supports older adults, we'd love you to put that with your name. So you should be able to rename yourself. If you hover over your name, it says more, and it gives the rename option. Just put the name of your organization next to your name. If you are here as an individual just wanting to learn, that's great. No need to put anything else near your name. We just want to try to capture who all is on this call right now. Okay, next question. Are there any preparedness takeaways or lessons learned since the pandemic that has been going on for over 1.5 years? And I'd like to turn to Raul for this question.
Yeah, I think the learning curve for us has been pretty steep in responding to the needs of seniors during the pandemic. We don't, I think as an area agency on aging, we haven't really done a good job staying connected to public health districts and also emergency, emergency responders such as FEMA. I think there was we had a we had a preparedness plan that we established, and it established lines of communication if there was ever a disaster. And so when the pandemic hit, that disaster plan was several years old, and people had the people that we identified in that in that disaster plan, some weren't even in those roles anymore. And so I think the biggest takeaway for us has been how important it is to establish lines of communication and to stay engaged. And so I think we can gravitate to silos, and we're kind of working in our own little circles. And I think what the pandemic has done for us is kind of forced us to be more connected to these agencies. And I think for our standpoint, we're going to try to stay connected by offering in services to staff and then participating in work groups like these. And the work still continuing. I think the pandemic, these relationships that we've established, I think there's already kind of discussions to continue on working together. And I think also for communication standpoint, I think also just communicating internally with our own staff. So when the pandemic hit, everybody got sent home. And so coordinating and organizing that communication with everybody working remotely, I think was definitely a learning process. I think now that we are comfortable working remotely, we have a kind of an easier transition for people to work remotely in case another disaster happens. So I think that if I were to point out good things that happened, I think those are the two things that I think would have happened: is force us to communicate with agencies that we don't typically communicate with, and then also to have the infrastructure to support remote work. So that's been my takeaways. And also, one last thing: senior centers are a great way to get the word out. They're just little community hubs for seniors, and I think we capitalized on that, on disseminating information such as vaccine information and food access programs as well, that we able to connect with seniors. There's more I can share, but I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Great, thanks, Raul. Okay, I know we only have 10 minutes left, believe it or not, and we'd like to leave the last 5 minutes for closing. So we have 5 minutes left of this panel. So I see there are some questions in the chat. One of them, Jenny says, I have taught several preparedness workshops for foster families, and the hardest question has always been how to deal with prescription medication, especially that which has to be refrigerated. A few pills in the go bag, but then what if they run out, etc. Wendy, do you mind addressing this a little? I know that this was one you wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, because this is really tough because our insurances don't let us fill prescriptions very much in advance, which if anybody has any power to change that's listening, please do. But what we can do, I think you can refill at least 7 days in advance. And so the advice that I have heard from other healthcare folks is just start right now refilling those medications as early as you possibly can. And that starts to build you up a little bit of a stockpile. So you've got a little bit of a buffer, because 7 days is not really going to be, do we really expect Walgreens to open back up in 7 days? Because my husband's got me all paranoid about the earthquake. So that's all. So that's about what we can do for that. And that was my advice. Oh, and if you have got oxygen tanks, same kind of thing. Don't let it, normally you can keep 6 at home or however many your provider lets you keep. If you use one of them, get that one refilled right away.
Great, thanks, Wendy. And was there anything else you wanted to expand on? Because the next question I was going to ask you was, how can
Okay.
someone remain independent before, during, and after a disaster? Is there anything else you'd like to elaborate besides the medication side of things?
Oh, what was the brilliant thing I was going to say?
We could also keep moving if you need
Yeah,
a
we can.
moment.
I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No
I don't
worries.
know.
If you think
Yeah.
of it, let me know.
Okay.
I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning. Oh wait, someone said for refrigerated meds, I have a plug-in cooler that's small and goes in my car. That's very
That's a good
resourceful
idea.
and creative. And someone else asked, is there a good resource for a video that gives a good example of build a kit for our visual learners? Good question. I would check out that ready.gov build a kit site. I know there are some graphics on there. We could also follow up after this webinar, but there are some videos and graphics. Brenda, do you have something to add? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. One of the things about build a kit thing is a lot of people, they look at the list and think, oh, I can't do that. So, it's not something you do overnight. Start with what you have on hand. Look at the list and start with what you have on hand and to build your kit. And then do it, some of the, like I know State of Alaska has a thing where you build it over a year or something like that. But just start with what you have and then with what you think is the most important. Like in Alaska, obviously flashlight batteries aren't going to be a big priority in June because it's not dark, and so don't think you have to go out and spend $500 to build your kit today. So don't be overwhelmed looking at the list, but it can be a process building your kit. So
Great. Thank you, Brenda. Oh,
I thought
yes.
of something.
Okay.
So in line with that, in terms of getting enough food, to have our 2 weeks supply of food, again, like Brenda said, don't do it all at once. Just if you go to the store and you're buying this, throw in an extra can. And don't make it a bunch of special food, just make it the same food you always eat. And you just keep rotating that stuff forward. So you don't have to have a whole lot at one time. And in terms of your kit, you could think, do I live in an apartment? Do I have neighbors next to one neighbor next to me? Maybe I can't do the whole kit, but if my neighbor next to me could do some things, I could do some other things in between the 2 of us or the 3 of us or the 4 of us and build a little club of people around you and pool your resources. That might help.
And that was a perfect segue. Thank you, Wendy.
Yay.
We are short on time, unfortunately, but I just want to reiterate that we are in this together collectively. We don't need to do this alone as individuals. We each bring strengths and skills like Mark spoke to, and we are part of a community, whether that's our households, our community, our larger community online, this network now that you're part of. So just know that this is a team effort, and I know it can be overwhelming at times, but just think whatever you are doing is a little better and more proactive than not doing it. So when it comes to preparedness. And so with that, I am going to bring back our slides, but I would love if there's anyone either on the panel or in the chat, if you have any ideas of gaps or needs or things we can do at the federal level to help support the collective efforts with the states and regions and cities and counties. I mean, there's only a team of 3 of us, so we're quite limited in bandwidth when it comes to our individual and community focus, but we are planning to focus a lot more on specifically the demographic of older adults and how to help older adults get better prepared. We've put a lot of energy into youth preparedness over the last few years. We've created a youth preparedness council with high schoolers who are leading their own workshops for other teenagers in a few weeks. We hosted a summer camp and workshops. So we're planning to expand our outreach because between youth and older adults, that's a huge part of the population and two very connected demographics to their communities and to their loved ones who influence and like motivate other people to get better prepared. So if you have ideas, whether it's more webinars besides the one on Thursday, a more focused workshop, please, you don't have to let me know right now, but we'd love to hear at some point, whether it's now in the chat, or if you want to speak up, or if you want to email us after, that's great. Someone did say, how do you find youth preparedness groups and opportunities? Oh, that's a really good question. So that's a perfect transition. First off, round of applause for our panel, please. Reactions are welcome. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna unspotlight you all now if I know how, and then I'm gonna wrap things up with a few more slides. So thank you for joining us. That was super helpful. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm struggling to unspotlight a few. I'm not sure why. Okay, well, Brenda, I'm just gonna leave you up there. I'm not sure how to take your spotlight off. So you are on camera. Let me see. I'm not sure, but that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now.
I can stop myself.
Yeah, maybe stop your video, that might help. And I'm gonna share my screen, so this should show up. Can you see it? Tanya?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So once again, if you can go ahead and fill out that highlighted link right there, we would love your email address if you want to stay in touch and get more resources from us and hear about future opportunities. Also, if you're with an organization that provides support or services to older adults, we'd love for you to note that down. Sam, if you could go ahead and post the Connect Solutions link in the chat. Oh, Tanya just put the Google Forms link in the chat again, so go ahead and take a look at that while this is up. And then in a minute, Sam is going to put the Adobe Connect Room link, which is a great dashboard full of preparedness resources, including youth preparedness resources, because I knew someone asked about that earlier. There's both general youth preparedness information at the national level, as well as Region 10 specific information. And Sam just posted the link there, and you can access that at any time. It'll prompt you to sign in as a guest, and you can just put whatever name you want and access it. And with that, this is our final slide. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time, energy, and interest in this topic. And we hope to see you back here on Thursday. Same time, different link. Hopefully you have the flyer because it has a different webinar link. And both webinars are being recorded and will be available on our resource dashboard that Sam just put the link to. So check back there next week and they should be up. But with that, I am going to stop recording in a minute. If you want to stay on for any final follow-up questions. Oh, Sam also just put the PDF of the resource list that we've compiled in the chat. And I believe she also put the slides, the PDF of today's slides. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it and have a wonderful rest of the day. And we'll stay on if anyone has more questions for us. Thanks.